Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys. Welcome back to our /EntitledPeople, where people truly believe they can do what they want, when they want, and nobody else matters. And in today's episode, who needs enemies when you have the worst sibling ever? One OP tells the story about the time her sister kidnaps her kids, and another about a freeloading, good-for-nothing sister who's nothing but headaches. Guys, I hope you enjoy the stories. Don't shake your heads too hard. And as always, you can send or link your post to this email right here. Let's dive in. So this one's long and it's a crazy ride, but I can't even. Okay, so first I have 3 daughters. And at the time this happened, they were almost 4, 6, and 9. My sister, the entitled Karen at the time, had 2 daughters, aged almost 4 and 7. Here's some minor backstory. So my sister's kids have 2 fathers. Her oldest daughter has a sperm donor who's a multiple-time felon, and he was in prison when she was born. And the lies about her dad got outed to her when she was like 3 years old, out of the blue. It kind of did a number on her psychologically. Her younger daughter was born with massive health issues, resulting in being transported as an infant to Boston for emergency surgery. She spent 2 weeks in the NICU and had 3 abdominal surgeries by about 8 weeks old. So my sister kind of disappeared one day on her first kid, saying to her, "I'm off to have a baby and we'll be a family." And then she didn't come home for weeks. Backstory over. Okay, so this was summer of 2011. My girls and I had a great apartment, but with crap neighbors and a worse landlord. He decided that because he wanted to rent to college students as he could make more money on the unit, he evicted me. Long story. The guy took me to court, and the judge gave me 2 weeks to move out. I needed to pack house in that time, and also to find a new apartment within my insanely low price range. Enter my entitled sister. So my kids often spent time with her and her kids, 2 states over, because they were close in age and she had a big house on a huge plot of land in the country. It's actually our family's land. I usually sent them to spend a week or 2 every summer with her because the break was great for all of us. When I told her my frustrations regarding the move, she offered to take them earlier than planned, and in fact, keep them for a few weeks, while I got settled into the new place and unpacked, as I had finally found a place. Before they went to her, my daughter Nina and Lily spent a few days with their dad's mom, Grandma, who lived across town from us, who fostered several children. While there, Nina had been roughhousing with the other kids and had slammed into the baby's playpen, waking him up. Grandma's dog, an annoying terrier, was super protective of these kids, especially the baby. So he starts nipping at Nina and actually scratched her cheek with his tooth, breaking skin. I got a call about it, but I was told it was a minor thing. Grandma had cleaned it up, she was fine, okay. The next day, I'd arranged for my ex-husband's mom to drive the girls to my sister's house since I had no car. My daughter Chloe was to follow a week or so later, as we planned for them to be there for about 2 or 3 weeks. Ex-husband's mom picks them up from Grandma, brought them to my house to pick up their clothes, etc., which my psycho mom had kind of thrown together for them. While I got them situated with their things, my sister called. She reminded me that I need to send along a note granting her medical permissions to treat my kids, along with their insurance cards. She told me to just write IOP, grant Karen temporary custody of Nina and Lily as of July 12th or something. Now, I had always sent this note with them, and never had it even occurred to either of us to word it that way, and that set off all kinds of weird alarms when she said it that way. So I tell my sister, no, there is no need for all of that. I know how I have to write it. I've done it enough times. Don't worry. Besides, there's no way I'd write something giving anyone custody of them. Not that it would be legally binding anyways, since there's a court order with their dad and me. Hearing me say that, she kind of laughs it off, but it stuck with me. So the kids get there at night around 7:30, and my sister immediately calls, and she was flipping out about Nina's cheek. She was cursing out Grandma, cursing the dog, the whole 9 yards. I told her I was pretty pissed too, but it didn't seem overly severe, but to just keep an eye on it. She agreed she would. The next morning, she called and said that Nina's cheek was looking puffy and red, and she was starting to worry. I told her she should get it checked if she was worried, and she said she would after work. That afternoon, she took her to an urgent care, I guess, and she got her treated. My daughter had developed cellulitis in the wound, and according to my sister, the doctor had claimed that she should have had stitches in it. But, quote, it was way too late by then, too much time had passed. I barely got to speak to the girls because they're busy playing, my sister said. And here's the thing, almost every time I called, the kids were busy. I barely got to speak to them, and their father even less so. Meanwhile, my apartment was supposed to be ready in a week. The landlord had lent me a one-bedroom in the meantime, and my stuff was stored in the apartment while they repaired it. But after a week, I was told it would be another week. And also, I was moved to a different apartment because that one got rented. This kept happening. A week turns into 2, and then turned into nearly a month. I hadn't seen my kids this entire time. My sister was always busy, so busy that I couldn't even video chat them. So busy that whenever I called, I barely spoke to them. And the thing is, my sister never called us at any point. So one day, I called to talk to her, and she told me that her daughter and Lily, both around 4 years old, were upstairs in the bathtub, while Nina and her other daughter were out back playing. She was having a beer. She and I then chatted about a number of things, including the fact that Lily had been having trouble sleeping, and that my sister had repeatedly given her children's Benadryl to put her to sleep. I flipped out knowing that information, and she says I use it on my kids all the time. There's nothing wrong with it. I told her that was BS. Don't drug my effing kids to make them sleep. That's not okay. I've never drugged my kids. What the F? She then pops open her second beer. We then talked about growing up with Psycho Mom, among other things, and she began demanding that I write a book about my life, saying people need to hear about it, our lives are so wild. By now, she was then on at least beer number 3, and she began slurring slightly. She says to me, promise me you'll write an effing book. Effing swear it to me. And this entire time, the pair of almost 4-year-olds was still in the bathtub upstairs, unsupervised, which the 6 and 7-year-olds were under the supervision of my daughter Chloe, who had arrived a day or so earlier. Over an hour on this call, and I wasn't able to speak to my kids once. But I learned that my daughter was being given unnecessary medications for my sister's convenience, and that my kids were left unsupervised while she day drank. And my apartment was still not ready. I spoke with the girl's father, who was fed up. He says, I don't care if it is or not. They need to come home. They've been gone long enough. We can make it work until your place is done. They can stay with you during the day while I'm at work, and then stay with me at nights, whatever, but they need to come home. I agreed. And at this point, it's been nearly a month, and Lily's birthday was fast approaching. So I called my sister to tell her about this, to tell her that we wanted the kids home, and she exploded. She says to me, that's not happening. They've been here this long, and I have rights now. They're not going anywhere. I won't let you take them. You're not even fit. You don't have a home for them or anything. Plus, you have effing mental issues. You're always depressed. This is when I point out that their father wants them home, that we have joint custody and he has a home for them. And my sister just goes on and says, he isn't fit, he's never been. He's effing useless and neither one of you has been any kind of effing parent. You are not going to take them until I say so. Hearing her say all of this, I was livid by now, and I called my psycho mom regarding it. She immediately begins echoing the things my sister said, how I wasn't a good enough mom, how their dad was useless, etc., and to let my kids stay with her. I just told my psycho mom that I was done with her at that point. The next day, their dad and I began making plans to get the kids. We decided that we both needed to be present in case of any kind of confrontation. That meant we need to take 2 separate vehicles, and as neither of us drove, he spoke to his brother-in-law, and I, my mother-in-law, but neither of them could bring us until that Saturday, and it was Thursday at this point. I then made the mistake of informing my sister that we would be coming on Saturday, and she screams at me that she wouldn't just let the kids go, that I wouldn't be taking them. So I called the local sheriff and I explained the situation. I asked that he go and check on these kids as I hadn't been able to speak to them for days. The sheriff informs my sister, when they show up, you will be sending these children home with their parents, unless you have a court order signed by a judge. So my sister calls me up screaming again, because how dare I send the police to her home? Who did I think I was? That in the 7 years she's lived there, she's never had police at her home. And I traumatized her babies by having cops show up like that. I told her I would see her Saturday, and then hung up the phone. And this is when I realized what's really going on. When we were kids, she would always break her toys, especially her Barbies. And then she would steal mine, as I was more careful with mine. And this was the adult version of this, but instead of broken Barbies, my sister was trying to steal my kids. Because in their own ways, her own kids were broken, mentally ill in one's case and physically in the others, whereas mine were relatively healthy and were mentally well-adjusted. It was the broken Barbies all over again. On Friday, I had plans to go with a friend to the mall. On the bus to the mall, my psycho mom calls me and she asked me, "So what you doing?" I ask her, "Why?" She then said, "Oh, I'm just wondering." I then say, "Why do you care?" She says, "Just curious, I'm just wondering what was up." I tell my mom, "Nothing, I'm busy, what do you want?" She and I hadn't spoken since the night she screamed at me that my sister was right and I was a crappy mom, etc, etc. So I was in no mood. She continued playing games, so I just hung up the phone. We then got to the mall and we were in the food court when my mom calls me again. I ask her, "What do you want?" And this is when my psycho mom says, "Oh, I just wanted to tell you to not waste everyone's time by going to your sister's tomorrow." I tell her it's not going to be a waste of time to get my kids. My mom says, "Well, it might be." I just reply, "They're my kids, it won't be a waste. Why the hell are you even saying this?" And this is when my mom drops a huge bomb on me. She says, "Well, because I'm standing on the steps of the courthouse with your sister and she has custody papers in her hand for your kids." And I flipped out right in the middle of the mall food court. I rushed into the bathroom for even the tiniest bit of privacy to find out anything. My mom wasn't saying anything more. She was absolutely gleeful, so I just hung up on her. I then called the girl's father at work and told them it's an emergency. When he gets on the phone, I scream, "They gave away our kids." Absolutely hysterical. He says, "What do you mean they gave away our kids?" I say, "They effing gave her our kids. She has the papers. The effing judge just gave her our kids." He replies, "They can't do that. What are you talking about?" I tell him, "They effing did. She has custody. They effing gave her our kids." At that moment, he flipped out as well, while I was panicking and racing to the bus stop. He rushed from work to the courthouse. Once he got to the courthouse, he ends up being thrown out, because the even-tempered man I knew was livid, and apparently he screamed at the court clerk, especially upon learning that the judge who had granted my sister an emergency hearing had left for her 3-week vacation, and we wouldn't have the first appearance on the matter until the end of the month. It was the 5th. When I arrived, I was given the papers which my sister had filed, which barely even mentioned the dad at all, and which claimed that I slept in, and that, quote, "My 6-year-old niece tells me that she takes her own pills." Well, of course she did. Who else's would she take? But what really got me was the medical report about the bite on Nina's face, and how supposedly neither her father nor I had bothered to seek medical attention for it. When I asked the court clerk about Chloe, who wasn't listed in any of the papers, wasn't even mentioned in them, he asked, "Who?" My sister had seemingly forgotten that I also had custody of Chloe. Her father had it during the school year, but I was custodial during the summer. And while she had gone on about how I was such a terrible mother and that I shouldn't have Nina or Lily, she had never even mentioned there was a third child in my legal custody. Somehow, the clerk didn't find that weird. Her father picked her up on Saturday. Lily's birthday was on the 10th, And the night before, I called my sister and I begged her to bring the kids to come see us, so we could spend time with her for her birthday. And this is when my sister tells me, I don't think it's important enough that she waste 6 hours of her birthday in the car just to come see you. I practically beg at this point. I say to her, please, it's her birthday. We've never not been with her, please. And this is when my sister tells me, if it was that important, you should have prioritized getting a car sooner. That night, I cried myself to sleep, leaving my phone ringer off for a change. When I woke up, I had several voicemails from a very clearly drunken mom saying how I'm such a crappy person, I deserve this, etc. I end up filing a police report and then for an order of protection against my mom. Eventually, the cases between my mom and my sister were joined, but that was much later. During the 3 weeks that we waited for court, my daughter's dad wasn't allowed any contact with the kids. He tried once, but he was told that they were busy, and my sister couldn't be bothered to get them to talk to him. I barely got to speak with them once a week. The first appearance finally came, and my sister appeared. The judge asked where the children were, and she said that she had left them back in her state with our aunt and her own kids because, quote, I did not think it would be that big of a deal to drag them out of bed so early to come here. The judge then asked when was the last time we seen the kids, and he was stunned to learn that we hadn't seen them since they left the month before, that she had refused us visitation on Lily's birthday even. The judge then ordered that my sister produce them at the next appearance a week later. Meanwhile, the CPS workers who had been to both my and my daughter's dad's homes to check them determined that there was no reason the kids shouldn't be home with us. The children's law guardian, however, literally argued with the CPS workers in front of the judge. My attorney let me read the confidential CPS report so long as I didn't take it out of the courtroom, and I only had until the judge began proceedings. I didn't get far, but it was far enough to learn that, quote, I was severely mentally ill and that the father of the children also suffers from severe mental disorders. At the next appearance, a week later, the kids were there, and the judge reverses her previous ruling, reinstating the existing custody order that the dad and I had. Our kids were returned to us with literally the clothes on their backs, like everything had been left back in my sister's state, because she had told the kids, don't worry, you'll be back tomorrow. During the appearance, the judge had offered my sister the opportunity to appear by phone the next appearance, and my sister made this entire whole speech how it was way too important, that these children are too neglected in their parents' care, and that she would make the journey to ensure that they were properly cared for and could come home to her, etc. The next appearance, things did not go any better for her than the previous one, and at that point, the case against my mom was joined. The law guardian argued with the CPS worker, making it clear that rather than representing the children's interests and desires as she was assigned and mandated to do, she was working diligently with my sister to try to ensure that she got custody returned. Eventually, the CPS supervisor had to appear and give a report to the court because she was sick of the law guardian attempting to undermine her people and wasting their time. So for the next appearance, my sister appears by teleconference. It was a fiasco. She repeatedly interrupted the judge to scold her own daughters, and she often stopped what she was saying because one of her kids needed something. Over a 20-minute period, she had stopped not less than 5 times to deal with her kids, literally yelling at them, all the while technically in the midst of a court appearance. The judge did not allow her to teleconference again. Meanwhile, she was attempting to get an attorney to represent her in this, but because she had even less than no leg to stand on, not a single one would take the case. No attorney in her state who was actually able to practice in mine would touch the case, and when she came to my city to attempt to hire one, they all laughed her out of their offices. She showed up one day, finally bringing the girls' belongings, over 2 months later. All of the girls' belongings were in a huge black trash bag, and there was no way that I could carry it home myself. So I had to agree to allow her to go to the girls' school, where I had to pick them up and then bring us home. Once there, she was all over them on the playground. My mom's friend just stared and tried to figure out who this crazy lady was, especially as she kept referring to herself in the third person to them. I managed to get a ride home from a friend instead of her because at that point, I did not even want her to know where the new house was. At the next appearance, she finally gave up, withdrawing her petition to seek custody. She still tried to contact the children only a few days later. The judge had strongly urged that given the length of time they were in her home, that I continue to allow contact between her and the kids, and she demanded that I do so right then, claiming I have rights. At that point, I told her point blank that the only rights she actually had were the ones I allowed her, and I encouraged her to actually look up case law regarding grandparents' rights, etc. She stopped even trying to call within the next couple of weeks. Nowadays, she has no contact with my kids, and they want none with her because they recognize that she's absolutely insane. What a freaking story that was, and I can't imagine having to live through that. Like, that entitlement is borderline psycho, guys, and to be completely honest, I did not even know you could do something like that. Like, who would have thought that you could just go to a courthouse, make up lies, and then be like, hey, so are these kids mine now? Can you grant me custody? Again, what a nightmare situation for OP, and being away from her kids for 2 months would drive any parent crazy. I'm just glad it worked out in the end and she got her kids back. With that said though, there's gotta be consequences to that, right? Like, you can't just kidnap somebody's kids for 2 months and get away with it scot-free. That is absolutely insane, isn't it? Guys, let me know your thoughts. So here's some background. I graduated from college 4 years ago, and I live at home with my parents. My sister graduated 2 years ago, and she also lives with my parents. We both got jobs right out of college. I pay my parents $800 a month in rent since my first paycheck. That said, last night, my parents were talking loudly about their financial problems in the living room. I overheard, and I offered to help my parents by paying more in rent. I was thinking upping the rent to about $900 to $1,000, since it covers utilities, phones, and internet. My parents were grateful. Now, prior to this, I never asked how much my sister pays in rent. I always figured that my parents charged us the same. So absent-mindedly, I asked them a follow-up question. I say, so how much is Beth paying for rent? My mom says, oh, she pays nothing. Insert a long pause. I say, what do you mean she pays nothing? My dad, visibly angry at this point, says, your sister doesn't pay an effing thing. My dad then explains how my sister recently bought a brand new car and she hasn't paid insurance on it, so my dad had to pay for it. She doesn't even pay rent. She doesn't pay utilities, phone, anything. So for the past 2 years, she's been living rent-free while I've been paying my parents. So later that night, we had a family sit-down talk. My sister did not want to pay rent, especially how much I was paying. She offers $100. My parents suggested that she pay $300 and I pay $800, to which my sister and I both rejected. The conversation ended with this. My sister screams and says, F you guys, I'm trying to live my life. And yes, these were her exact words, which pissed me off to holy hell. So my sister storms off to her room, and now it's only me and my parents in the living room. I'm extremely upset at this because it's massively unfair. My mom's upset that everyone's angry at each other, and my dad's angry that my sister refuses to pay rent, and she won't move out, and both my parents don't want the police involved. So I say my part before leaving. I say to my parents, I am not going to pay any more rent until she does. Because that's only fair, right? And if I do pay rent, I pay whatever she's paying. My mom says, what if she pays $300 and you pay $8? I tell her, no. My mom then says, but we really need the money. I tell her that's too bad. This is when I get up and go off to my room. So this morning, my dad comes in, and he tells me that I'm such an a-hole for not paying rent. That I should pay rent because it's the right thing to do and all of this. Meanwhile, I'm like, what the hell? Make sister pay rent. My mom, who's listening in, says, you've seen her. She won't listen to us. She won't pay rent. I say, well, that's too bad. My mom then gets angry and says, well, we wouldn't have had this problem if you didn't try to make your sister pay rent. And that was the last straw that blew it for me. I just slammed the door on my parents. I then heard my parents discussing how both their kids are rotten and useless, and how life was better back in the home country back in their day, when kids actually listened to their parents. Like, what the F? So am I the a-hole for refusing to pay rent until my sister does? You know what, like, it is such a crappy situation for the family to be that tight on money that they need OP. But in my opinion, heck no, OP's not the a-hole for refusing to pay rent until their sister does. Like, it's only fair, they both work. And doing the math, over 4 years, OP's paid almost $40,000 in rent, while sisters paid absolutely nothing. Like, I would be fuming, guys. Especially at the fact that the parents just let it happen and then pressure OP to pay more, all because we know your sister won't pay, but you will, so keep giving us money. Absolutely ridiculous. Like, she does have the money. She bought a new car, and she even said, F you guys, I'm trying to live my life. Like, that is some super duper entitled BS, and if I was OP, I would be looking to move out, because that $1,000, you know, you can go rent a place of your own. Guys, again, let me know what you think. And parents, what would you do if your kid refused to pay rent? I'd be giving them the boot. There's no freeloading in my house. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of our /entitled people. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's stories. If you did, hit that thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed, subscribe so you don't miss these crazy stories. And if you missed yesterday's episode on the channel, it's in our /IDon'tWorkHereLady, where a military Karen tries to order OP around and it backfires horribly. Guys, go check it out if you haven't. And myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.